Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasada Bhutale Shamati Bhakti Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Shani Navashesha Shani Radhe Krishna Tati Shatani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Rasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Hare Hare. So we might get the TV up at some point. Sorry about that. How's everyone doing today? Yeah, a little hot. Yeah, me too. It's pretty brutal out here. So today we are diving into a very appropriate text, chapter 2, text 14. And just want to get a kind of a pulse on who all's here, because here in the temple environment on a Sundays, this is like a one-room schoolhouse. Everyone know what a one-room schoolhouse is? You know, it's we have them here in the early days of the U.S. My dad actually went to a one-room schoolhouse. I grew up in the country. My dad went to a one-room schoolhouse, and so you have people from all different areas coming into the same space learning. And some may have only just heard about Bhagavad Gita. Some may have been studying Bhagavad Gita their entire lives. So I'm curious, is anyone here for the first time? Great, welcome. So glad you made it out today on this hot day. Great, welcome. Hare Krishna. So nice to have you here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about chapter 2, specifically text 14. And just to set the stage, because maybe we've been reading Bhagavad Gita for a few weeks now, and just to set the stage on where we're at with Bhagavad Gita. So the first chapter we know is setting the stage for Krishna delivering Bhagavad Gita. We were talking about this a little bit this morning in Bhagavatam class about how Krishna delivered Bhagavad Gita. He did that in order to reestablish the parampara, the disciplic succession, because it had been broken. So Krishna, we're seeing the stage of the battlefield, who are the players, who's involved. And then we actually see Arjuna's quandary, what his difficulties are. And in this end of the first chapter, we start to realize that Arjuna has a real difficulty ahead of him. He has a really difficult decision. He has a lot of confusion. He's bewildered. He's very bewildered about the situation ahead of him. The situation is that he's about to go into battle with family and friends. These are people that were his teachers, their uncles, their grandfathers. These are people who are very close to his family. And now he's suddenly sitting across from them in the battlefield. So we've come into chapter 2. The first part of chapter 2 is actually talking about some of Arjuna's difficulties. What are some of his doubts? And the next part of chapter 2 is going into Jnana Yoga. And that's where we're at now. We're in Jnana Yoga, yoga of knowledge, right? This is part of bhakti. We have to acquire some knowledge about Krishna, acquire knowledge about how to practice devotional services. And this is why we have class. This is an important aspect of coming together here every Sunday and in the mornings for Bhagavatam class. Just a little plug again. Please come. We'd love to have you here for class in the morning. But this is the reason, this is that we need to have the jnana as part of our understanding of Krishna. So let's go into the verse. I don't know if we're going to get it pulled up tonight. So maybe you can pull it up on your phone if you have it. It's Bhagavad Gita 2:14. So I'll read it, and then have the gentleman repeat a few times, and the ladies repeat a few times, then we'll dive in. Matra sparsha tu kunteya Sitoshna sukha dukkada Agama payino nityas Tanti tiksa bharata. Matra sparsha tu kunteya Shitosna sukha dukkada Agamam prayino nityas Stanti tiksya vaparta. Okay. Anyone
Matra sparsastu kaunteya Sitosrana sukha dukkada Agama payino nitya Sansitikcha bharata Matra sparsastu kaunteya
Ladies? Matra sparshatu kaunteya Shitoshna sukha dukkada Agama payino nitya Shanti tikshasva bharata. One more on the ladies' side? Anyone? Okay. So, word for word, matra sparsha. Sensory perception. Two. Only. Kunteya. O son of Kunti. Sita. Winter. Usna. Summer. Sukha. Happiness. Dukkha. And pain. Da. Giving. Agama. Appearing. Apayinaha. Disappearing. Anitya. Non-permanent. Tan. All of them. Titikshashva. Just try to tolerate. Bharat. Descendant of the Bharata dynasty. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O son of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January and February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the kshatriya, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are significant. To address him as Kunteya signifies his great blood relation from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. So, when I was reading this and I was preparing for this class, there was a couple things. Of course, it was boiling hot out yesterday when I was preparing for this, so that was an obvious direction to speak about tonight. However, there was another theme in Prabhupada's purport that I thought was really potent, and that was prescribed duties. So the two key points, the prescribed duty and being equiposed and tolerance, and how do those two things intertwine? So what is prescribed duty? We hear this used a lot. It's used in scripture. It's used in, Arjun has his prescribed duty as a Kshatriya. And as a Kshatriya, Krishna instructs Arjun. Arjun wants to, at one point, throw down his Gandiva bow and not fight. He would rather be a Brahmin and go into the mountains and remove himself from the situation completely. This is not the way of a Kshatriya. He was born into a Kshatriya family. He was designated as a Kshatriya. This is the role he took on. This is his prescribed duty. And Krishna is very explicit to say that we should not take on the duty of someone else. We take on the duty that is ours. It's not, if we are a Kshatriya, then we are a Kshatriya. Now, it's interesting, today in Bhagavatam class, we were reading about Vishwamitra, who is a great sage, who was born in a Kshatriya class, but his tendencies were Brahminical. So how does that work? So we have the idea of the Varnas, kind of in India it's looked at as the caste system. So we have this idea of the Varnas, the Kshatriyas, the Brahmins, the Sudras, the Vaishyas, these different classes of people. If you're born into a Vaishya family, does that mean that you cannot be Brahminical? Well, according to Krishna, you can absolutely be in the Brahmin class. Just because you're born in a Brahmin class, does that mean that you are absolutely 100% guaranteed to be Brahminical? Krishna says no. There are certain traits, there are qualities that go along with someone that is Brahminical. And they're very specific. Brahminical are compassionate, they are learned, they are religious, they are austere, they have very specific qualities that go along with being in the Brahminical class. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, okay, but he had many, many Brahminical qualities. He was compassionate. And Krishna tells him, this is your prescribed duty, okay? And when we have our prescribed duty, this means that we do it to our fullest ability. And the lesson of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna brings us along in this lesson to guide Arjuna through the process of understanding what the prescribed duty means in relation to bhakti. And this is a really important concept to remember, because we can have a prescribed duty, but is it a prescribed duty in the material platform? Or is it prescribed duty in the spiritual platform? How are we carrying out our activities in our day-to-day life? Is it material or is it spiritual? Well, how do we know what that is? How do we know whether it's a spiritual activity or material activity? Well, the question we can always ask ourselves is, who's in the center of it? Is it in the center of it for our own gain? Then it's a material activity. If Krishna is in the center of our activity, then it's a spiritual activity. And this is the way that we can look at our prescribed duty and carry that out. So the ultimate conclusion, don't spoil chapter 18 for you, but the ultimate conclusion we know for Bhagavad Gita is that abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. So the ultimate conclusion is that no matter what you're doing, you put Krishna in the center. Just surrender, whatever you're doing. And Krishna is very specific in his teachings. In chapter 18 especially, he gives us very specific instruction to say that whatever we're doing, it doesn't matter. We should not take on the responsibilities. We should not take on the duties of someone else. If those are not our duties, those are not our prescribed duties, we should not try and take them on. Better to do our own duties lesser than doing the duties of someone else better. So we have to really think about, doing things to our own traits, to our own nature. So it's really important, and I've thought about this a lot in my own life, especially in coming to a spiritual path many years ago before I came to Krishna consciousness. I thought, spiritual life's really important. How do I navigate spiritual life in the context of my material life? What does that mean? Does that mean that I should quit my job? Does that mean that I should move into a spiritual community? Only spend most of my day in meditation and reading Shastra? How does that look for me? What is my own personal prescribed duty? What does that look like? And again, fortunately, Krishna, this is the beauty of Bhagavad Gita, and this is why Bhagavad Gita is truly the scripture for a lifetime. It's not something that to read once and it's like, yeah, I read it, I'm good. Check that off the list. I read that book. I read that Shastra. Bhagavad Gita is really the nectar to be studied long term, because even me just reading this and reading this text, I just was able to pull so much more nectar out that I missed the first however many times I read it. And because when we take a very systematic and slow and thoughtful study over and over again of Bhagavad Gita, with each stage that we go through in our lives, we will obtain new realizations. And I was at a really great lecture. Danadhar Swami was in town a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to go see him, and he gave a really wonderful class about realizations. And the realizations that he was talking about were the spiritual realizations, right? Because we're going about in our day-to-day lives, we have kids, jobs, housework, running around, errands, these types of things that really just engage our brains. That, you know, we're completely and fully engaged and absorbed in those activities constantly, because that's the material world. It just pulls us in and it brings us completely to that focus, to that plane. However, throughout the day, the more that we focus on Krishna, the more that we try and bring the memory, so we remember the hearing, chanting, and remembering, the more we try and remember Krishna throughout our day, the more that Krishna will give us opportunities for realization. And those realizations can be so potent. They might seem small, but when we have realization in context with Shastra, right? That's the Shastra Shuksha. That's the Shastra Chakshu. This is the realizations coming from Shastra, that we have the vision to see through the Shastric eye. And that's when we can really make that connection to say, I had this realization coming from Krishna, and now I've seen it in Bhagavad Gita, how this can apply. We can kind of match it up. We can check ourselves, right? And really observe how this can affect in our day-to-day lives, how these realizations can really drive home with things that we're experiencing in our lives. So the prescribed duties, what our prescribed duties are, ultimately, it brings us always back to Krishna. Everything that we're doing, and of course we can look, there's the modes of material nature, which are discussed in a later chapter, and these are kind of governing forces. We have the mode of goodness, right? The mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance. And these things can govern our activities. But we want to try and maintain our prescribed duties, maintain our activities in the mode of goodness, so that when we're always putting Krishna in the center, and everything that we're doing is remembering. So how do we come to this point? What do? We remember. How do we remember, though? Anyone have any ideas? How do we remember Krishna in our day-to-day lives? Maha Mantra. Yeah, Maha Mantra is the way that we remember. Because we were talking in Bhagavatam class this morning, and we were talking about the yajna. We were talking about yajna and the yuga dharma, okay? So the particular verse this morning was speaking about a human sacrifice, which is Prabhupada pointed out, this was done, this had been done in the past. But we were talking about Treta Yuga, the dharma for that particular span of time was yajna. And the dharma for the period of time before that in Satya Yuga was meditation. In Dwapara Yuga, the yajna, the yuga dharma is deity worship. But what is our yuga dharma? What is our point and our purpose here in Kali Yuga? It is to chant holy names, right? The Harinam Sankirtan. This was given to us by Lord Chaitanya, and so Lord Chaitanya gave us all an extra assignment, right? So not only we put Krishna in the center of everything, but we have an extra special assignment because we have incarnated into the golden age of Lord Chaitanya. And our extra assignment is to spread the holy names. Not just to chant the holy names, but to spread them every town and village. Because Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is potent. That is potent. That is what we need to make sure that people can get in their ears and get into their tongues and in their throats and in their hearts. Because when you get that holy name into your hearts, then whatever your prescribed duty is, it's only for Krishna. Whatever you do, when you have the holy name ingrained, deeply embedded in your heart, that bhakti lata bij, the seed of devotional service, grows and it grows and it grows. And it suddenly outgrows all of those weeds, the seeds of weeds that have been planted by the material world. So chanting the holy names of God gives us the opportunity to grow the seeds of loving devotion for Krishna, to carry out our duties no matter what. No matter what. But here's the catch. We're a material body. And these material bodies are tricky, right? These material bodies are tough to walk around in every day. They have aches, they have pains, they have to endure heat, they have to endure Philadelphia snowstorms and ice and all kinds of fun things. So this material body makes it very difficult sometimes to keep ourselves focused on the Yuga Dharma, which is the holy names of God. But we try, right? But we come together, and this is why we come together every week, every day. Gosh, if any of you live nearby, that you could come in even twice a week and just come here and experience the glories of morning program and the deities, or come on a Wednesday for kirtan. And I'm not just plugging these for, selfish reasons because I'm here and I want people to come. I'm plugging them because they've changed my life. Because I was blessed with an opportunity many years ago with Tulsi service, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm still struggling. Tulsi is amazing, and I love her to death, and Tulsi still gives me challenges every day. So, but because I got the Tulsi service kind of put in my lap, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it brought me here every day. Every single day for the past 3.5 years. And because of that opportunity, it's been completely life-changing. So what can you do to ignite even just an additional spark that will bring you closer to Krishna, closer to really working in that higher platform of your day-to-day activity? Because Sadhu Sangha, coming and associating, being with one another, coming together, hearing, chanting, remembering, right? The top 3. These are the nine processes of devotional service. Those are the top 3. So when we think about this verse and really how we endure the physical body, we're enduring, right? But we know that great sages, that Prabhupada had to endure all kinds of austerities to get here. He came over on the Jaladuta. He came over back in 1966, and he came over here, had a heart attack, several heart attacks on the ship. He had barely any money on him. He had to go and stay with family for a little bit, but he really didn't have anything to work from. And he came here thinking that he was going to get a bunch of more Brahminical type educated people that he was going to find and preach to. He started trying to preach into the universities, but they were steeped in their own philosophy, so that didn't work. But Prabhupada sets an example. Arjuna sets an example of how we carry on. How we look at our physical body and we think, this is difficult, this is really challenging. And again, we can't ignore, it's not that we're going to ignore what's happening in our body. We're not going to just gloss over it. We have to maintain our physical bodies. This is proper, it's the right thing to do. And being in the field that I'm in the integrative health field, so it's hard for me to ignore the maintenance of the body, right? But we have to maintain the body to the point that we can carry out our prescribed duty. And the discomfort, the austerities and the discomfort that comes along with this is just part of the physical world. This is the material world. This is Maya too. Maya, she's a tricky one. She will try, every time we try and get a little closer to Krishna, she'll try and insert herself a little bit. Like, just come over here. Because that's how Maya operates. But the more that we can stay engaged and remember, oh wait, nope, this is Maya, this is something going on. Because we're going to hit road bumps. We're going to definitely hit road bumps. And these difficulties, the austerities and the challenges that come up in life, they're always going to happen no matter what. This is just part of being in the material world. But how do we actually stand back and address them? How do we deal with them in our own lives? If we are not feeling so equiposed, we might be like, dig our heels in and fight. And maybe we will, say like, this isn't fair, or get ourselves very twisted up. I mean, I've done it. I still do it, and it's catching myself. to say, wait a minute, no, this is the material, we're still in the material world, still here, these are still difficult things. And to be able to take a step back and to reconnect with Krishna and to remember, Krishna, okay, this part's really difficult right now, and whatever you have, I guess I'm going to endure it, because I trust that whatever you have in store for me, it's going to be for my best interest ultimately, right? Because as soon as we make a decision, and this is the part that comes in, as soon as we make a decision to want to approach God, we have to make that decision to want Krishna. That's step one. We have to want it. Krishna's not going to just, I've said this before in other classes, Krishna's not caveman style. Krishna's not going to bop us over the head with a club and drag us in and say, love me. That's not how Krishna operates. Krishna wants us to want him. But how do we awaken that in ourselves? Through the material world, all the difficulties that exist in the material world, the hot and the discomfort and life situations that can be so difficult and drag us down so badly. But yet, how do we lift ourselves back up from that? And how do we make want Krishna and to love Krishna? How do we awaken that in ourselves? And how can we awaken that in others too? Because the more people that want to love Krishna, the more people that are going to be chanting, they're going to be working and clearing their heart, bringing compassion and love into their hearts. The more that we're going to understand one another. We may not always get each other, but we can understand what we're all trying to do here. That we're all spirit souls, right? This is the message. I am not this body, I am spirit soul. That I am spirit soul here, and then you're spirit soul, and you're spirit soul, and you're spirit soul. And we all have that same spark. Vishnu Dad gave a class this morning about our spirit soul is so minute. So minute, it's tinier than the end of a hair. But what is that doing? Our soul, it's all pervasive throughout our entire being. So when that is awakened, all it takes is just a little bit of cleaning off of the dust that covers that window into something a little bit deeper, right? We want to have that divya chakshu, that more spiritual vision. That's going to give us more and more desire, and it's going to give us more and more connection to Krishna, connection to God over time. And I teach a lot actually. I teach usually about 2 or 3 times a week in my career, and I teach here twice a week, usually in the mornings. But there's an analogy that I really like to use, and there's an analogy of a tree. Okay? We like trees here in Krishna consciousness. There's a lot of tree analogies, but this one's, let's say you buy a new house and your backyard needs some shade, right? So you decide you're going to buy a little sapling, and you're going to plant a bunch of little small baby trees in your yard, and you plant them, and you're like, gosh, these aren't really giving me much shade right now. So you're like, come on, tree, you need to grow right now. Does that work? No. You pull on its branches, maybe try and stretch the leaves out. No, that's not going to make your tree grow. That's not going to do anything to get your tree to grow any faster. What do you do to your tree to make it grow faster and healthy? You water it, right? You nurture it. You love it. You prune it. Do all the things that are going to help the tree grow beautifully over a due course of time. So we can look at our spiritual life. We can look at all the difficulties that come into play. And they don't get easier, right? Because the more we take steps toward Krishna, we may get an occasional test, so I've heard. Krishna occasionally tests us to make sure we're really sincere and that we're going to push ourselves. Because sometimes we get a test. Some of these difficulties, we get a test. Krishna is giving us a little nudge to say, okay, are you ready for the next step? Are you ready to go just a little bit further in your spiritual life, or are you going to back off a little bit? What's next? Are you going to just kind of hide, or are you going to face this test? How are you going to respond? Okay? And these tests, we don't always know they're tests. They might just pop up. This is these difficulties, all of these things that come in. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's Maya just going, okay, over here. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, okay, great. And suddenly we're just, put the Joppa beak down, and you're off, doing something else, grabbing the phone. I'm guilty, done it. Grab my phone. Oh, my text message just tinged, and I said, whoa. I'm suddenly off in my phone. It catches me all the time. My husband's always like, what are you doing? Oh, right, yeah. So getting yourself refocused and getting ourselves reconnected. Because Krishna's there, he's waiting. Okay, here she goes, off again. Okay, luckily, she'll come back. Okay. And next time maybe she'll come back and she'll be a little more focused this time. So this is that we can all pray for, that we will become more focused, and that these austerities, these difficulties, that each time we go through these difficulties and these austerities, the hot, the cold, all the difficulties of our physical body, the difficulties of relationships and life in the material world, that we can eventually come to the platform of tolerance. That's the message, right? That's the message for this verse, tolerance. That we can tolerate these difficulties no matter what. We are equiposed in any circumstance, and that's kind of hard. That's not easy to do. So this is where we have to water our tree, nurture our tree, give our tree food, be gentle with our tree, because it's not going to come overnight. For some, maybe some very gifted people will have that immediate realization. Arjuna, obviously, he's a very, very elevated being. And Arjuna had Krishna to share this wisdom with. So with Krishna standing right in front of you, giving you everything you need, and Arjuna had the proof of Krishna. He got to see Krishna's universal form. He got to see Krishna's form, the Narayan form. He saw Krishna in his fullest opulences. So he saw that, not because he had so many doubts, but because we have doubts, right? Because Arjuna realized, he knew who Krishna was after a period of time when Krishna was giving all this guidance. He realized, oh, you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have beyond beyond the knowledge that I could ever perceive. You are beyond my perception. You are Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he was there advising Krishna, advising Arjuna. But in chapters 10 and 11, Arjuna says, "Show me your universal form. I want to see universal form." And this is a bit of a ways into Bhagavad Gita. It's not like he said, "Show me your universal form" in chapter 2. Right? This was a little bit of the ways in. It wasn't right away. Because he had already heard, he knew who he was talking to. He knew this was God standing in front of him. But he knew that this was something that was going to be passed down for millennia, for eternity. And that he needed to be able to show that Krishna is, in fact, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that everything in Bhagavad Gita is literally a guidebook for our lives. It's a textbook for bhakti. This is everything, every step, every answer that we need in order to be able to come into the platform of bhakti yoga. But right now, because we are here in the material world, many of us are in that stage of sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti, practicing. We're practicing bhakti. We're trying. Krishna prema bhakti, bhava bhakti, the ultimate, right? We're in sadhana bhakti. We're trying, we're learning. We're governed by the rules and regulations set forth by Prabhupada and set forth by Krishna. This is how we carry out devotional life. These are the things we do. This is how we learn to accept austerities. This is how we learn to surrender to Krishna. This is how we carry out our duties, our prescribed duties. We carry them out in a systematic way, with Krishna always in the center of all of these activities. This is the goal. We put Krishna in the center. Our prescribed duties are surrender. Whatever we're doing, we surrender to God. So, ultimately, when we're out in our lives, and we think, okay, well, gosh, maybe I'm working in some company, some corporate company, It's really hard sometimes to remember Krishna because, my phone's ringing off the hook. I have 100 emails that just piled in on top of me. I'm very overwhelmed by life. How do I remember Krishna in my day-to-day life? That's tough, right? How do we do that? Well, we practice, because again, sadhana is the practice of bhakti. We're practicing bhakti. So we practice bhakti by chanting our rounds. As much as we can, we chant. And we practice, maybe we have things on our desk that remind us, right, Krishna. Yes, Krishna is here with me. My whole life does not revolve around this email right now. This is not the center. I think it is right now, because all of my attention is focused on it, but it's not the center of my life. The center of my life is Krishna. And in that moment, we can take a step back, we can take a deep breath. And I love to do these breathing exercises with my patients that come in my clinic. And I just breathe in for 4 counts, exhale for 8. It's a nice little yoga breathing exercise, right? But when you do a nice long exhale out through your mouth, right, it just centers you for a minute. And in that moment, you can breathe in and exhale, just exhale out. And you can chant, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay? So, that can bring us back. It's just something so simple, It's little things. We don't have to walk away and drop everything, throw down our bow, throw down our laptop and say, I'm done, right? Maybe. Sometimes you may want to. But realistically, we probably can't, okay? Because we have obligations in this material world. And Krishna knows that. It says it in Bhagavad Gita, we have obligations. Krishna knows all this already. He's here. He's in our heart as super soul. He's got the eye on everything. He knows exactly what you're going through. He knows exactly what you're dealing with in your day-to-day life. So he's not blind to any of this. Krishna has the pulse on everything that's going on in your life. But it's when you decide in every opportunity that you can to take a deep breath and remember. Take a deep breath and remember Krishna. That brings you back, it recenters you. And it helps you tolerate whatever's going on. And even with my patients that where I'm not speaking in a Christian conscious, from a Christian consciousness perspective, when I have patients coming to me, I have a lot of anxiety patients that come into my clinic. I work in integrative health, so I see people with all kinds of serious, chronic, complex health conditions. And I see anxiety piled on top of it with people. It's a really common condition. And the anxiety is because of the inability to control what's going on in their lives. And there's a fear. And there's overwhelm. And because there's so many variables, there's so many difficulties that are coming at them, this is my patients, coming at them from all different angles, and they can become anxious. Okay? So we're talking about the same thing here. We're talking about difficulties. We're talking about too hot, too cold, my body aches, I had a fight with someone. These are all the difficulties that happen in life. And thinking about it, when I told them, I said, first of all, we can only control ourselves. We can only control how we choose to face the world. Because the world isn't going to change because of something we say. Maybe. Some people have very potent speech, but we can't change people in general. We can't change who they are. We can give them some new insight, we can give them some new ideas, but we can't change their way of being. But we can make some changes in here. And the changes in here, the biggest change that we can make in here is to invite Krishna in. And invite Krishna in to stay permanently. Because, invite Krishna to be with us at all times, and to invite Krishna into our lives constantly engaging in a dialogue with Krishna. And then we will slowly tolerate more. It's not the word doormat, right? We're not saying, well, okay, just run over me. This is the more tolerant than a tree, humbler than a blade of grass. And this isn't putting the welcome mat up, saying just like kick me. I'm open for target season here. This is not the message, right? The message is that we fight for what we need to fight. We fight for Krishna consciousness. We fight for other devotees. We fight for Prabhupada. We fight for spiritual potency. We fight for those things, and we tolerate the other material things that are around us as best as we can. And trust that Krishna has a plan. Krishna will guide us through. He'll help us navigate, right? Because Krishna is the ultimate navigator. He is the kind of the beacon on the front of the ship. He's just telling us where to go. And he will guide us through difficult situations. We have to do our part too. It's not that we just stand back and say like, oh, Krishna's got this one. I'm just gonna hang back and see what he figures out. We still have to take steps in the process of cultivating our own Krishna consciousness. It's important that we take those steps to cultivate our Krishna consciousness. So what steps are those? What are the steps to cultivate Krishna consciousness within ourselves? Well, we talked about them already. So chanting the holy names, Shravana, Kirtana, okay? Smara? Yeah, you got it. Exactly. So the hearing, chanting, remembering, those are the top three. And so we try and read a little bit every day, chant a little bit every day. If you're not committed to 16 rounds a day, work your way up to that over time. If you are committed to 16 rounds a day, try and make them really, as best as you can, every day work on making those 16 rounds better and better. And carving out more and more time for those 16 rounds that are meditative rather than integrated with other things, all right? The japa that's vacuum cleaner japa, right? We don't need vacuum cleaner japa or doing the dishes japa or those kinds of things. The key is that we want to take more and more time to try and focus our japa as much as possible. Really try. It's not easy, but try, right? Because we're, again, sadhana bhakti, we're practicing. And the only way we practice, just like doctors are practicing medicine, we're practitioners. We're practitioners of bhakti yoga. So in that practitioner space, we are going to make a commitment to ourselves. And we're the only ones that can make that commitment to ourselves. No one can make you make a commitment to God. No one can make you want to love God. This is a decision that you have to make. Only you. But once you make it, Krishna will reciprocate. And that's the beauty of Krishna's love for us. His love for us is so immense that we can't even comprehend Krishna's love for us. Because when we take even a minute step toward Krishna, he will come toward us. And he'll help us. And he will open doors for us and make it so that we can find our way to what we need to practice bhakti. So, I'm going to leave it with that. I'm going to ask if there's any questions, and if not, we'll turn it over to announcements. So, Hare Krishna. Any questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, Jonah.
You spoke earlier about realizations. You were referencing Dharma Maharaj, and how those realizations can kind of propel us. They're like going through the day and you get these. You realize that something that could seem very insignificant can actually be kind of an awakening of a remembrance of God. How do we know that those realizations aren't, that they may be convictions for us, but they're really spiritual?
Good question.
Realizations and not just us kind of concocting something in our minds.
That's an excellent question. It's really, so the question was, how do we know that realizations we have are actual spiritual realizations and not some manifestation from our mind? And that's really important. The ways that we know, so we have tools available to us. We have shiksha gurus that are around, that someone that has more experience than us, someone that has a deeper understanding, a deeper commitment to their bhakti, to their sadhana. That's one way, is we can check it with someone. that's above us and say, well, I had this realization. Does it check out? Does it seem like that might be a spiritual realization? We can consult Shastra. Okay? Shastra is always an excellent place to go because Prabhupada is the foremost Shiksha Guru of ISKCON. He's our founder Acharya. He has given us so many different ways to hear his guidance through all of the books he's written, plus all the letters and all of the lectures. So there is a wealth of knowledge from Prabhupada. If you have a Diksha Guru, if a guru that you have taken initiation from, that is another person that might know you on a different way, in a different way, that you can go to that person and say, I had this realization. Does this seem spiritual? Where does this match up? Is this okay? And so we have a lot of tools in our toolbox to be able to check these things. And it is good to check them, for sure. So that's a great question. Thank you.
How did you come into Krishna consciousness?
How did I come into Krishna consciousness? Okay. Well, I had been on a couple of more new agey spiritual paths, like crystals and stuff like that, and it wasn't for me. But I really, at one point, I was in a marriage that was not working out very well, and I at one point just became very inward and was really praying to God. I felt, God, I think I need to know you better. It's like this is something I need in my life. I need to know you better. And so I just have been praying for that, and a few months later my marriage went completely, and Krishna took away everything that I felt was important to me in my life at that point, and I knew it. As soon as it happened, it was hard and it was painful, but at that exact moment I said, he's cleared a path for me. All right, here I come. So I went into a thrift store, and I was just shopping for some clothing, and I happened to come across Bhagavad Gita as it is for $1. I'd never read it before, wasn't super familiar with it, but I was like, I need this book right now. And I paid that $1, and I forgot about my clothing, and I took the book home and I read it. And I said, interesting, this is kind of cool, this is what I was looking for. And I came to the temple one day, and yeah. Pretty much it. And I just kept coming and coming and coming, and you're stuck with me, so.
You have a problem with the afternoon?
Oh, Ed, stirring the pot. Ed said, you missed a part of the story. He's like, didn't you have an issue when you got to the end of the book? And so he's gonna make me tell this part. So when I got to the end of the book, I was like, where did this amazing wisdom come from? Because this is wisdom that I've never encountered before in my life. And I looked at the back and I said, it's the Hare Krishnas. Now, me being a Westerner, growing up in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, I remember the Hare Krishnas kind of like, handing out carnations, and they were in the movie Airplane, and I mean, not the actual Hare Krishnas, but like, actors doing the Hare Krishna thing in the Airplane movie. I just thought, if this is what Hare Krishnas were all about, I had the wrong conception, because this is way deeper than what I was seeing when I was a kid. So I gotta get what they have. And that was kind of my final realization that brought me to the temple the following Sunday. And Vishaka Dasi was actually the one that was giving the Sunday Feast lecture that day. I was very fortunate that exact Sunday that it came, it was Vishaka Dasi, that she was highlighting photography from her most recent photography book at that point she was releasing. So it was a perfect, Krishna just arranges everything. It was just like a perfect time for me to have my first time coming to the temple, to have someone like Vishaka Dasi being the one giving class. So yeah, and I just kept coming. So anyway, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.